Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well today. I just wanted to take a second to invite you to check out my new project, bradcartwright.com. I have created a resource for you as you head to the May 2020 exams. If you're an IB student, an AP student, head on over to bradcartwright.com where you will find video lessons, notes, slides, key terms, practice questions, and other key components to make you feel good before you go to bed before the test, all right? So head to bradcartwright.com, create a new free account. You don't need a credit card to create the account. Check out the free previews and use the coupon code May2020 to receive a discount. And just to give you an idea of what it's like over there, check out the following video. Well, here we go on our first stop in our journey through economics. This is called Foundations of Macroeconomics. It's also a look at the overall economic activity that's going on inside an economy. And this video is just an introductory video, get our minds squared away again with what's happening in macroeconomics. If you've studied microeconomics, which practically everybody who studies macroeconomics has already studied microeconomics, what you got to do is make some shifts, some language shifts, some thought shifts to make sure you're comfortable with what we're actually studying. Because of course, macroeconomics looks at the economy as a whole, okay? So, a couple reminders from the first intro video, and that is this, that the government's job is to be really good parents of the economy. Remember that always, okay? And they have four main economic goals as the parents of the economy. This is what they should be doing. If a government's doing its job, these are the things that they should be doing, okay? Number one, right? They should be concerned about economic growth. Number two, they should work to maintain a low level of unemployment of 5%. They should, three, maintain a low and stable rate of inflation of 2%. And that 2% level of inflation, that should say, is based on a 2% level of economic growth. So maybe say it again. The major economic objectives of a government is to have 2% economic growth, 5% low level of unemployment, and a 2% low and stable rate of inflation, and then also to take care of everybody in the economy, which means that they work to have equity, opportunities for everybody by redistributing income from those who have been fortunate to those who aren't so fortunate, so that over the long haul, over time, everybody will have equal opportunities. And now this is the thing that's really critical about the studies of macroeconomics. You got to look at the long term. You know, just like parents who are raising young children, it would be a lot easier to just let a 2-year-old or 3-year-old, 4 or 5-year-old have everything that they want. But in the long run, that's not really how it works out. So parents actually have to manage their household in such a way that's best for the long term. Governments must do the same. The best thing for the long term of a government, and therefore of an economy, and then therefore, right, of the citizens, which in this analogy we're building, those are the producers and those are the consumers, and those are the two children within the household that the government's managing. And the best way to take care of all people over the long haul, based on economic theory, based on 250, 60 years of taking a look at this stuff, is 2% growth, 5% low and stable rate of unemployment, and a 2% low and stable rate of inflation, okay? And then, on top of that, because we all know that capitalism creates inequity, the government's responsible for making sure that they provide the social programs for people who are in the lower ends of socioeconomic status, okay? Super important you get that in your mind right away. Those are not political statements. That's the economic goals of a government, okay, that's doing its job. All right. So, in this unit, we're going to take a look at 3 different things. First, we'll take a look at the circular flow model, which if you're familiar with microeconomics and the foundations of microeconomics, and maybe you even took this course here at the econ school, I went through the circular flow model, but that's actually a macroeconomic concept, and we're going to go through it again because if you're going to study macroeconomics, man, you got to understand this particular model, okay? Then we're going to take a look at the measures of economic activity, and I call it GDP and friends, gross domestic product, and then all the derivatives of gross domestic product, because gross domestic product is one way of measuring the health of an economy, but it's flawed. And as economists, we must realize that we're always dealing with flawed information. We're always dealing with pretty good information, but then there's other types of GDP versions, GDP and friends, that we'll take a look at that will really help you understand or help us understand and have a more accurate understanding of what's going on in an economy. And then lastly, we'll take a look at the business cycle. The business cycle is super fascinating. It's a cycle of highs and lows that all industrialized societies go through. All mature economic countries go through this cycle. The cycle seems to mysteriously be about between 4 to 5 years, this cycle of highs and lows. And the government's job, and this is what's important, is to try to flatten that out as much as possible, to try to make the trajectory of growth to be as flat as possible. They don't want highs and lows. They want slow and steady over time, okay? So those are the 3 topics we'll take a look at in this particular unit called the level of overall economic activity, or the foundations of macroeconomics. All right. But before we move on, a transfer of language from micro talk to macro talk, and this is really important if you're just fresh off your studies of microeconomics, which everybody is when they get to macroeconomics. And I want to take a look at these terms just so that you have a familiarity of what these terms mean now, and also so that going forward you can start to use them, obviously. In any sort of analysis or evaluation that you might have to write, you're going to have to use these words. Of course, associated with all of these videos are notes and these particular slides, so you can be able to get this information there as well. But just to talk about it from the beginning, let's take a look at the differences between like a microeconomic concept and a macroeconomic concept, okay? So you'll see this column here, microeconomic concept, market, demand, supply, price, quantity, decrease in demand, decrease in supply, and increase in supply. These are all concepts you should be familiar with from your studies of microeconomics. Now, an analogous term, but in macroeconomics, to market would be the national economy. So in other words, in micro, you take a look at like the market for chicken, or the market for, mate cups, or the market for any particular product. But in macro, what they're looking at is the overall economic activity in the whole country, which means you got to add up all of those mini markets, right, to create a national economy. So the definition is it examines all economic activity taking place in a country. Okay. Aggregate demand, or AD, is demand, but on the aggregate. It's the demand for all goods and services in a particular economy, or the total demand for a nation's output of goods and services. Instead of talking about supply and the supply of a particular, maker of mate cups, we're going to take a look at aggregate supply, which is the total supply of goods and services by all industries of an economy, right? You take up all the industries in an economy, you add them up, and you get aggregate supply. Microeconomics looked at each individual industry. Macroeconomics looks at all the industries that happen in a particular geographic location, which we call nowadays a country, okay? Price. We looked at the price of mate cups, the price of iPads, the price of stylus, whatever, price of shirts. Now we're going to take a look at the average price level, which is an index of the average prices of goods and services over time in a particular country. Okay, so macroeconomics, we look at the average price level. In microeconomics, we looked at something called quantity, which was the horizontal axis in all of our graphs. Now we're going to take a look at something called national output. National output is the total output of all industries in an economy. Okay, that's the horizontal axis in our aggregate demand, aggregate supply diagram. A decrease in demand means that fewer people would be buying a particular product. But in macro world, a decrease in demand would create something called a recession, which is a fall in total output resulting from a decrease in aggregate demand. Okay? In microeconomic world, we talked about an increase in demand, but when increase in demand happens on the aggregate level, on the total level, on the countrywide level, it creates something called inflation, which is an increase in the average price level resulting from an increase in aggregate demand, because the vertical axis of our diagrams in macroeconomics is average price level. So when average price levels go up, then that's an increase in the overall average price level of a particular economy, and that actually creates inflationary pressure, okay? We're building, yeah? Okay, So what about a decrease in supply? Well, in macro world, we call that a supply shock, which just means that there's a decrease in the overall supply in a particular economy. Okay, so that would result in an increase in price. So if you imagine falling supply means there's less of something, then prices are going to go up. Okay, and then an increase in supply, we could call that also economic growth, which is an increase in the national output resulting from an increase in aggregate supply. Okay, so those terms, by the way, this was put together, but that particular slide is put together by Jason Welker, a very, very good IB and AP economics teacher out there in the world. He's got an excellent YouTube channel for you to check out, and I got that information from him. He also puts together a great set of review manuals. So I got to give Jason Welker some credit for putting that together for us, because he does an excellent job of making things clear. Okay, so there you have it, foundations of macroeconomics and what we're going to study. And the first thing we're going to take a look at next is something called the circular flow model, which is a way of understanding in a graphical sense, sort of an overview graphical sense of how an economy really functions. And we're rolling on, my friends. We'll see you there.